Are happy that you're here. Kind of so you know how this is going to go is we'll have workshop, we'll open the floor for any questions, and we'll go from there. Now, we are very lucky, and I know I've talked to a lot of you already. We've talked about sort of the commitment that we have from the community, as well as I think one of our key partners is SCAPE, which is the Southwest Colorado Accelerator Program for Entrepreneurs. And we actually are fortunate enough to have one of their founders with us this evening leading tonight's workshop, Mr. Gary Masner. Now, Mr. Masner has decades of experience.
I'm an old guy then.
No, I think it's great, right? Decades of experience in doing startups. Let's see here. Went to RPI in Troy, New York, which actually my father-in-law went to also, graduated from.
Never heard that.
And then after done there, went and got an MBA at Stanford. Currently is an active entrepreneur. His company right now tests rocket engines in the desert. And so really exciting things. Also, if you guys know anything sort of about the big consulting arms out there in the world, Mr. Masner worked for the very famous McKinsey and the McKinsey Consulting Group. Very, very prestigious. And since has come to Durango, helped establish SCAPE, and really has been a key part of the Hawk Tank success. I don't think we'd be here 3 years in without SCAPE and Mr. Masner's contribution. What Mr. Masner is going to talk about today is the business canvas model. I would argue that this is really the most modern, current way to really think about your new venture. We have handouts that will help you sort of follow Mr. Masner's discussion, and we want this to be as much a two-way as possible. Please, this is your time. I mean, you are in the room with an expert. I would argue one of the leading authority figures in the Four Corners area right now. So take advantage of it. If you have any questions at all, ask now. This is a great opportunity. Now, at the conclusion, just so you know, is we've already taken the liberty and we've produced a whole bunch of these business canvas models for you to use for your own business ideas, and you can take one when you leave, and Mr. Masner is going to kind of show you how to use this tool. He's also going to talk about where this tool comes from originally, and it's from a gentleman by the name of Osterwald, and we actually have Osterwald's work right now in Read. We're going to make sure that it's part of reserves, and so you all will have access to that in Read library. We've already gone ahead and purchased a couple copies of that for you all, okay, to use in Read. Well, without further ado, Gary, thank you so much.
Thanks.
Okay.
I'll add a couple of things to my background just to fill it out. I guess I didn't like to work in one place very long, which in my day was kind of unusual. Now it's getting much more common. But after McKinsey, which I just went to because they paid the most, and had no idea what I wanted to do, so I thought, wow, go to a consulting thing. I can do almost anything. I then went to work for one of my client, which was truck manufacturer, Freightliner. Went up as CFO and moved over to run sales and marketing. Was named president, and then we sold to Daimler-Benz, Mercedes, and they wanted to move me to Germany. I didn't want to go there, so took a year off. Went back down to the Bay Area and ran a computer company for a couple of years, and then went into the venture capital business on Sand Hill Road for 10 years. Started two companies, couldn't run them both, so sold one of them, ran the other one a little longer. One I sold too early, one too late. I'll tell you those stories someday. And then took 8 years off, went sailing around the world, and moved here to Durango and stuff. So great place, been here, I don't know, 15 years now. It's amazing, it goes by so fast. Did start the rocket engine testing business. I have retired from that now. turn it back over to my tech partner. So I think got Entrepreneur of the Year award last year from the Chamber of Commerce group. That's, I think, the meeting tonight, right? They all seem to overlap with us and stuff. But so anyway, this is a great place. I really just feel really fortunate to be able to live here, and you know, to be able to give back, help out other people, to build businesses and stuff is a fun thing. I really get a great kick out of it. So, so again, tonight we're going to talk about this business model canvas, how you should use it and not use it to some extent, and we'll be going back over pieces of this thing, I think, through the whole program. So we'll get into it. Let me start, though, and ask a question. How many of you have at least a team of 2 people working on your ideas? Or I should say, who doesn't? Daniel, how important is having a team working on something?
Having 2 ideas, or two minds are better than one.
Yeah.
Saying, so.
And we'll talk about that a little bit. So let me ask you another question. How many of you are highly confident that you have a great business idea? Okay? So on the one hand, I'll say good. You should be optimistic. You should believe in it. On the other hand, please don't. Okay? Because, believe it or not, everything is going to change. In your plan, your approach, I mean, maybe a few things will stick, but you're going to be surprised at how much pivoting is the word used these days when they're discussing it. And we'll talk about it a little bit more when we get into the value proposition part of this. So,
can I interrupt real quick, Eric?
Sure.
I'm really glad you asked that question about those individuals that right now are going it alone. One thing that we discussed today that we're going to try to roll out in the next 2 weeks is we want to kind of have a hot tank speed dating. This is something that Scape has recommended the last year or so, as well as a couple other partners, and so we're going to do it. And what it's going to be is, it's going to be an opportunity, if you have an idea but need some skill sets, that you can come and kind of pitch your idea. Pitch what your needs are. There are individuals right now on campus who have tremendous skill sets, be it graphic designers, be it maybe accounting, and they would love to contribute, but they don't have an idea. And so we're going to try to make a event where we'll have some pizza, maybe, or some food and some beverages, and really just sort of make it exciting. Where, you know, maybe you get a little 30-second pitch, and then the individuals that have their capabilities and skills will give their pitch, and we'll see if we can make any sort of marriages. Just so you know, that's something to please keep your eyes and ears open for, and that's something that we'll be moving forward within the next sort of 14 days.
Great.
Thank you, Gary.
So, business model canvas. What I wrote right underneath that, it's not a business plan. Everybody knows what a business plan is? Typically just a lot of garbage words that you write down, and spend a lot of time writing words rather than thinking through what it really means and what your assumptions are, and what the key things that have to happen really well to make it work. And very hard. It takes a lot of time to do it. You spend too much time worrying about getting it pretty and not enough time about really working through the essence of it. And it's hard to communicate with people. You give somebody a whatever, 13, 15, 20-page business plan, you know, their eyes glaze over, and they don't get into it enough, and they don't understand it, and they can't contribute. So that all changes with this business model canvas. And as Professor Valdez said, it started, he was actually a Swiss PhD student in economics, and for his thesis he decided that he could define in what ended up as 9 different boxes all of the activities and all the important things that any company would have to do to be successful and think about it and grow and do all of those things. He didn't really aim it at a startup. So there are a couple of pieces missing, and we'll talk about those as we go through it. There's been an awful lot of work. Eric Rice and Steve Blank from Stanford are working on it. They've changed it, and there's a couple of others. There's one other guy, I forget his name, it's too hard to pronounce, but if you go on YouTube and just put in business model canvas, you'll come up with these, and there's some great stuff there. and in terms of change about adding the features. We will talk about those, but if you want more detail. I've said this before, I have never seen a business idea grow and go so viral so quickly. A buddy of mine from, from Stanford, who came into McKinsey a few years just as I was leaving, helped write In Search of Excellence, which was, long before you guys were born, one of the really popular business books that just went crazy. Turned out to be based on some false assumptions and turned out not to be a really accurate roadmap, but that was one of the biggest ones I've ever seen. We've seen some books since then that have done the same thing. But this one just went crazy worldwide. It's been used by almost any organization you can think of. So Google uses it for their stuff. It's being used in a lot of universities, including Stanford, to teach entrepreneurial kinds of classes. The DoD, Department of Defense, uses it. Individuals use it. Nonprofits use it. It's because it's a model that works, and it's the essence of any kind of an operation that has to achieve results, including individuals. So it's really good. What it does, and you'll see as we go through it, it gets you to focus very specifically on individual pieces and individual important pieces of your business and address them almost independently, but then see how all of the things tie in together. And if you change one thing, then it's got to flow through the rest of this. And it's done in a pretty easy way. I'm going to start right out and tell you that, should have put this one up first. This is the spiel I just went through. So, okay. So the first one, so here, you see it right here. Typically when we do this escape, we've got some individual ones set up and taped to the big ones, which, do they know this? It's going to happen anyway. You're going to get one of these to take home, okay, at the end. And I encourage you to put it up in whatever space you walk by most often all day long. And stop every time you do it and look at it.
So this is what you all can leave with today. And this is what Mr. Madsen will take you through, so you can tape it up and you can actually sort of work on this over the next several weeks. Okay, and if you need replacements, of course, we can do that too, but just so you know, you'll go through one for ways.
And you don't actually write on this. You write on little sticky notes. Because again, this is going to change, okay? And your ideas, and you don't want to come up with the perfect answer at the start. You want to have lots of different variations. You want to have lots of different assumptions that you need to test to say, well, you know, for this to be successful, I need this to happen, or this, or this, or this, or I think this is what customers are going to want. This is the relationship they're going to want. You do those. You do alternatives on each of the sections, and then you hone in on it over time and change it and really focus into where you come out at the end of this with your final model. Okay? So we're going to go through these in sections because until you figure out what your value proposition is, that's the one in the middle. Why? Because it's the most important. It is key to everything else in all the rest of these activities and things you have to do. Until you've thought through that and gotten it, you really can't do much else. Okay, so that's where you start. Not that that's not going to change. Again, it could change the more you test out things with potential customers or potential hurdles in your technology or what it's going to cost you to go through a certain distribution or sales channel or whatever it is. But that could change over time, and will, and should, but it's got to be the starting point. Then you focus on this quadrant, if you will, this upper right-hand corner. These are all the customer-facing things. Okay, and you're determining that, and you got to get that first. Then you talk about all your activities, resources you need, and all those things. When you get that done, then you can begin putting the financial projections of revenues and costs and things like that down here. Not that you don't sort of try to fill it out all at once, when you go through and say, okay, here's where I am, and you go through the whole thing, but then come back and focus on this section and kind of feel a little bit more comfortable. Not totally, you should never feel totally comfortable. A little more comfortable with this before you move on to other things. Okay? Any questions, interrupt me, okay? Or if something's not clear or, you want more information?
One question, Gary, is, and especially for, I think, maybe for students that are unfamiliar with this, is how are we defining what value is?
Yes, okay. So that's where we're going first.
Okay, good.
Okay, so value proposition is, what is it that you're delivering, offering to your customer that they're going to value enough to pay you money for? I mean, if you're doing something for free, it doesn't take much, but I don't think any of us are in here to do something for free. So you've got to really define what value you are providing to the customer. You are either, we sort of divide it into two directions. Are you solving a pain that they have, or are you giving them a gain? So a gain may be a whole new way of doing something, or a whole new product that's just much more, just cooler. It doesn't maybe do anything else, but it's a little cooler, or you give them something else, or you increase their prestige, or you make them look better to their friends, or whatever it is. So those are gains. On the pain side, it's that they're spending too much time, or they're not getting the end results that they want from something. It's cost too much. A lot of those kinds of things. And you have to determine what that is and why what you're offering as a value proposition is unique. And then as you go through the whole sections of the rest of it, what is it that I'm going to do that makes sure that my value proposition is something I can protect? I can build a moat around it, around my castle, right? So that so that all these barbarians are going to try and come in and compete against me and copy what I'm doing are not going to be successful. What is it that I can do? Because if you don't have that, then you don't have a sustainable business. You have one that, and there's a lot of those. I mean, you go back to, Word Perfect in the old days was the standard word processing system, and my company and some others helped kind of put that aside and brought in Word. Nobody even hears of it. Nobody's probably ever heard of Word Perfect in this room, right? So there's a lot of places where somebody came out with a great idea, but then another company with greater resources saw the opportunity. I mean, okay, Instagram and Snapchat or whatever. I mean, there's a lot of those. So, you've got to figure that out. You're not going to figure out all of it, but you've got to feel that you've got some aspects of that that are going to protect that. So on the last page of your thing, you'll see a thing where you actually fill out, what I'm offering. I don't think you need to necessarily do it that way, but that's what you're doing. You're saying, my customers are going to buy this product because it solves this problem in this way, and makes them feel better, have more time, whatever it is. So you've got to focus on that. It's a little different with each of your business ideas for sure, but you've got to be able to do this. And I would encourage you to repeat your value proposition every night before you go to bed. Get up in the morning and repeat it again. See if it's changed. See if you've had some unique thought during the night that you weren't aware of. But keep doing it and talk to people about it. It's part of the elevator pitch that we call it. So the elevator pitch, I'm sure a lot of you have heard about that, but that's where you get in a 5-story building on Sand Hill Road with a venture capitalist. He says, what do you do? And during that elevator ride, you've got to be able to tell him totally the important things about your business and why he ought to be intrigued enough to invest. And obviously, the value proposition is the cornerstone of that elevator pitch. And we're going to get each of you to be working on those elevator pitches. You add some things about how you do some things, how you price it, customer relations, but it's the value proposition. Okay, so first thing you do, work on that, okay, because that's going to help define a lot of other things. Okay, clear enough to start with, you think, or questions? Okay.
Question?
Oh, sorry.
So, like, with my project, for example, it's a little tricky. I'm trying to start a custom sticker business.
A custom
Sticker.
sticker. Okay.
I've already been doing it, actually.
Okay.
I've had a customer, there's a head
Okay.
shop in town that's already bought some stickers
Okay.
for me.
And who's the customer?
It's Cloud9. They were looking to get their logo out on stickers, and so one of them had approached me, learned that I made stickers, and I produced some stickers for them.
Okay.
But my issue is that for my value, I mean, stickers can only go so far, and there's a bajillion other custom sticker
Right.
companies.
Right.
So I guess my question is, how would I be able to make my value greater than those bigger companies?
Well, you've got to think about that, okay? I mean, you've got to either have a better design, and they're probably going to use their logo on the stickers, right? So you're not going to add any design capability to it. You're probably not going to be able to do it cheaper than other sticker places could. You know, you've got to come up with something else, frankly, to make that work. I mean, obviously you can get it started, and at first, a lot of customers might sign up with you and try it and all that, but you know, if it gets to be a big time thing for them, then they're going to go look for somebody that does it cheaper. So maybe you've got to find a way to be the distributor of those, to get them out to people, actually wherever. What are they going to be stuck on, by the way? Anything.
Anything. I mean,
Okay.
they're waterproof and
Yeah.
they're set.
Well, you've got to have something like that that you add to it, right? Otherwise, nice idea, but too easy to duplicate by, you know, already existing competitors that could probably get into the business pretty quick. So you're going to have to think of something else you add to that whole value prop stuff.
I have a friend who owns a sticker business. His whole thing is like art.
Yeah.
It's sticker art, so he makes money by doing other types of stickers that other people do.
Right.
So, and it's locally made, so he's got that whole like
Right.
niche.
Right. And that's why I asked about design. You know, if it's something unique that they want, that you add a real design touch, fantastic. You know.
Or even like sort of what, you know, like sort of what sort of service can you provide where someone, let's say online remotely, cannot provide, right? And so that could be sort of value prop.
That's service.
Like the distribution of them, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's what, yeah, exactly.
So that sort of might be that angle that you, because what you ultimately have to do is, why would they come to you as opposed to just going online and getting them that potential resource?
Yeah, and they could come to you because you're the first one that brought them the idea. The question is, how long will they stay with you?
Yeah,
Right.
that's been kind of the struggle so far that I've had.
Okay.
Cool.
Any more?
Well, I mean, if I could put my 2 cents on it. One
Okay.
thing I picked up last year from Montana was, like, a funny saying is, price, quality, customer service, pick 2. That's business. So you might not be able to beat them on price, but beat them on customer service and quality. So you have to pick what you're going to do. And you've got to compete in some way. So find your value in the company.
Yeah.
Customer service, quality, price, and excellence. So you can be successful.
Yeah, and it strikes me as one that frankly is hard. I mean, maybe you've got something unique in a waterproof sticker like you're talking about, but I'm guessing a lot of other people can do that too. So, you know, quality, it seems to me to be hard to differentiate in quality, but maybe you've got some ideas. So, yeah. But yeah, I'd say, you know, we've all kind of said, I think, probably something along the service line. It's not just the service of getting them the stickers. It's once they've got them, they don't, you know, they're not in the business of somehow getting those out unless they just happen to mail them out to people that ask or whatever it is. I'm not sure. That was,
I also want to throw in my 2 cents with that.
oh, good. By the way, you should do this, okay? You should feedback, help each other, come up with ideas, and do that. So,
Social media and being able, like, the point of stickers is kind of get people to look at them. But if you can manage, like how Snapchat has all those little dots and stuff, if you can include, like, all those social media features where somebody can take their phone and snap it, and that way they can get connected to whoever the sticker is trying to market to, that could be a service that you're including that not a lot of other things or places do, because locally, you know, it's huge.
nice idea. Okay, so this is where you're going to start. And this is the one you keep revisiting and you keep checking, and everything else, you know, you can't finalize until you're really comfortable, just like we just talked about right here, until you think you've got something that's workable. Okay? So then from there, obviously, you go on to customers. And you talk about your customer segments. And too often, with all the businesses, you know, you come in and you sort of generalize about your customers. And that's changing a lot. But you've got to get very specific about your customers and what it is about them, what attributes that they have, whatever those attributes are, we'll talk about. It could be psychological, emotional, dollar-wise, fiscal, physical. You know, it could be any one of those things. Could be, but you know, certain customers are going to have the kind of attributes that make them more likely than the general population. And you have to figure out how to target onto that segment of customers, because you don't have an unlimited marketing budget. Right? You're going to be very limited, and you've got to make every penny count. So you're going to be, so the more work you do on this, the more likely you are to be successful because you've really identified those customer segments most likely to buy. You've talked to them, you've validated your assumptions on what they value, what they want in whatever you're offering as a product. For instance, you might have a product that saves them time, but the change from the way they're doing it now is so hard to put in place that they don't save enough time in whatever they view as their window looking forward, that they think it's worth it. So they just stay with the solution they're not happy with, but it's easier for them and doesn't require a lot of work or time or money or other things. So those sorts of things you have to get through and understand. And we'll spend the whole next session, the whole next workshop actually, talking about this whole marketing side of your business. How you put numbers on how many of these customers are likely to buy and when, and how you do this in terms of setting up their personas, about talking to them. I even saw, so there's this new word that all of a sudden people think, wow, this is something new. They call it design. Okay? And design isn't only a design of a physical product, it's a design of whatever, whether it's an app or a web service or an audio, whatever it is. And it's how I even saw somebody, like they had just had some breakthrough. Well, we think about how to emphasize, somebody say it for me, I can't emphasize. Yeah, thanks. With your customers, right? And, wow, is that new? Hasn't everybody been doing that for a long time? Well, a lot of companies have. And I just saw a thing, I think it was in Fast Company magazine or something. There was even a picture of a couple IBMers standing up there with this picture of a customer. And we always used to do this 10, 12 years ago. We'd actually put up a picture of what we thought a standard customer might look like, whether it's a 24-year-old woman or a 65-year-old guy or whatever, and then describe them, actually build this story around them and think about them and try to get ourselves in their shoes, right? And think about and so this IBM thing says, I think it was Susan, or Sue. Here's what Sue says, here's what she does, here's what she thinks, and here's her emotional thing or something. So even IBM's talking about it. So anyway, they're really trying to understand and define the customer, okay? And until you do that, you're going to be wasting a lot of time and resources. And time and money are your two primary resources, and it's a big waste if you don't do this well. Okay, make sense? Kind of? Dollars makes dollars, not just cents.
It seems like you want to do that to focus your energy towards your customer, but you also want to stereotype and kind of exclude another set of people that...
Okay, that's a good point. And you're not excluding them. What you're looking for are early adopters. There's a couple terms for it. One is early adopters. Okay, there's a set of people with certain characteristics, and they change depending on the product or service, but they tend to be early adopters. And that's what you're looking for. You're looking for somebody that you can acquire as a customer at the least acquisition cost. And we'll talk later in another session about really you've got to be able to measure that and project it. What's it going to cost me to acquire every customer I get? Because some businesses we've seen cost them more to acquire a customer than they're going to make from them in 5 years. So it's not a very good business model, right? So you need to do that. The other term for it is a beachhead market. It's the first market you hit. Now, when you land in Normandy or whatever, you're first on a mile-long sand beach, but your final expectation is you're going to take over all of Europe, right? So yes, you are excluding temporarily those kinds of customers because they are unlikely to be as eager, willing, or able to buy your product.
Is your business model kind of taking that into account?
Sure.
This is going to be my target initially.
Sure. You do that in your financial projections. And you do that in everything and how you're going to reach out a little bit differently over time. Your beachhead market, you might find one way to reach them and bring them into the process. And then the mass market could be a totally different way. It could be through Amazon or whatever. Okay? But good question. Any others?
What is multi-sided platform?
Yeah, so good question. I should address that. So we've had lots of businesses. Let me give you, eBay is an example. Uber is an example. More and more in this, if you will, the sharing or non-ownership economy. So it's what you've got to do is not just build up one side. It isn't that you just make 100 widgets and then go out and find customers. You've got to bring on your suppliers, whether it's like eBay has its sellers on, and then a number of buyers. If they don't get a lot of sellers, the buyers aren't going to look at it. If there's lots of sellers and no buyers, they're going to get tired and not go back on. So that's one. I mean, you can look at Uber, you can look at all of them. We've had several of those. We had somebody that was going to help bicycle shops sell their surplus or aging inventory online in a supported way by their by the companies that were supplying them with bikes. Now they're going through eBay or Craigslist, and their companies don't like that, don't want them to do it, so we're trying to come up with a fair way. And again, there he had to build up, he had to get an X number of bike shops on, have enough inventory online, but then he had to bring the buyers on simultaneously, because if the buyers weren't there, the bike shops would go away, and if there weren't enough bike shops, the buyers wouldn't be interested. So that's what a multi-sided market is, and it's just much more difficult. We just had one company in Scape last year that was trying to offer social visits by what they called friends to a kind of isolated elder people. And it's a really good idea. There's clear health evidence that it's one of the leading causes of deteriorating health, if not death. You know, behind only one or two, it's like the third one. It seemed like people would want it. She set a price that she thought she could get friends involved enough, and it just turned out that she couldn't add in enough. She couldn't get enough elders and often their kids to be willing to sign up and pay for the thing. So she had friends, but not enough customers. And she could get them, but it just cost a fortune to try to get each one, and it just turned out not to be a valuable business model. And we said that from the beginning, by the way. We said, we are concerned that the pricing that you think you need to get to share between you as a company and these friends that are out there doing the socializing, doing the visits, driving, you know, and spending 1 hour, so, you know, they're probably driving almost an hour to get to a customer, and so they're looking at what they get paid is kind of half of what they get for the hour they spend there or something. And we just said, we're worried that that price you think you need to bring on a lot of friends, that the elders are not going to be willing to pay that. And it turned out to be the key assumption, again, in the value proposition, the key assumption in the whole thing that turned out to be the problem that made it not a viable, scalable business model. Okay? And again, up here, you know, if you're looking, some of your markets could be mass markets. If you've got an app, you've got to get that out there somehow to masses of people to make it valuable. Others, you can afford to do it, especially if it's a business-to-business thing. You can afford to kind of start in a little niche and then expand it from there as you get better at it, as you can bring your cost a picture down, as you get a good reputation for service and things like that. Okay? So it's part of, it kind of links together the value proposition and your and the customers that you're going after. What is the relationship you're going to have with them? And it could be something as simple as you're going to mail them a box and they open it and that's the end of it, right? Or it could be some other kind of a service or product where you really need some ongoing dialogue to make it valuable, or you're setting this up as a recurring revenue stream, which is always the best, and where you charge them, you know, every month or every quarter that they're customers, you charge them some amount, but you got to keep providing service and support and potentially new whatever features or whatever it is to that. So that's, and you can look at almost any industry, the airlines, hotels, or wealth management firms. You know, let's pick wealth management firms. So some of them are just robot things where, you know, that a robot just changes your stuff all the time and tells you what they did and all that. And on the other end are people that say, no, I want to sit down, you know, at least once a quarter with my client, talk through with them, see if they've got any problems. You know, that obviously takes a lot more time and money to do that, and so you've got to price it differently, and you've got to find customers that it's worth them paying that money because they just feel better, or they've got the money anyway. It doesn't really matter if they're spending a little bit more and things like that. So kind of really important in sort of thinking that all through. And I think, well, I mean, you know, if anything, we're going to the extreme of poor service. I mean, I'm just shocked at the change, I think. And airlines is the classic example. I mean, you know, of how they're charging and what they're doing and what they're, you know, what little support or about handling and touching and the personal touch and all that. And everybody else is going to that. You know, you go online or you call somebody and you've got to go through 6 minutes of entering data because your time is worthless in their opinion, right? Before you get to a real person that can solve your problem, who's probably, you know, not paid very much to start with, but, you know, is being paid by that company. So, you know, those are examples where you can decide what level, how much personal touch, what relationship, what ongoing kind of thing you're going to have, and that will clearly have cost issues. It will have staffing and process issues that you've got to put in place. And it also, though, allows you probably to feel better about holding on to customers or getting them to be repeat purchasers or to buy another product that you want to sell them. And that's called churn, when you don't hold on to them. Whatever percentage of your customers you lose in a certain period, they've churned over on you and you've lost them as customers. You don't want to do that because you paid a lot of money to get them to start with. The cost of keeping them is a fraction of that, and so the cost of churn is really high which you would see when you model that in your financial projection. Okay? And again, it gets back to, you know, if you decide that you're going to go, that for some reason you think a customer's been paying for all these extra features in some product or service that they don't really need, and they really value one piece of it, and if you focus in on that, you can do better and beat your competition. That's the way to go. And we'll talk about that a little bit more, again, when we get into the marketing section. It's called Blue Ocean Strategy, a really great book about how different companies have sort of set up and said, we've got to differentiate ourselves in our product offerings, our pricing, our features, from our competition to be successful. And we'll go over a little bit of that. Yeah, we'll do that in the marketing section. When we're going to go into a little more detail in this. Okay, so once you've decided, you know, who your customers are, how they're kind of getting whatever product or service they're getting today, and what your relationship's going to be, if it's going to be different, then you can decide what your channels of distribution are going to be. How are you going to get the product or service out to them? Is it going to be through, you know, you're just going to sell through retail? Are you going to sell on Amazon or online on your own thing? Or is it the kind of business where you're going to be business to business, and it's got to be a little bit different? You could do online demos to really get them through that first part of the buying funnel, where, you know, yeah, they've shown that they're interested enough to at least look at your demo. It's now worth the cost of you calling them directly and answering questions and doing all that. So the whole channel thing is important, and there are obviously costs every multiple level of a channel that you might have. Like if you do sell retail, whether it's a chip peddler, everybody's seen his stuff, right, or some other products. Neil's got, you know, he's calling on some of these retails, the Whole Foods and others, but, you know, he's got a brokerage group he pays them something to go out and they actually sell and stock the shelves at the retail grocers, and then the retailer takes a markup. So, you know, by the time he gets done, he's getting or roughly half of what the end retail price is and stuff. But at his volume, he doesn't really have an alternative solution, and he's got to pay that. And again, what you'll see in a lot of these, and what you begin thinking through your financial projections, is that the way you do business at first may not be profitable bottom line, just because you're incurring extra costs, whether it's to make something the way you're doing it inefficiently potentially, or how you're distributing it, that's not that you're paying extra things because you want to encourage people to take on your product, whatever it is. But that's okay if you can have a clear path to changing those costs and getting back to profitability relatively soon. Okay? Questions? No? Okay. So, so this is so that was kind of the customer thing. Then you can begin, again, a first pass. You're not trying to do detailed stuff yet, but you're talking about how you're going to price your product. We kind of went into that with recurring revenues, how you do things, and pricing a product is very difficult, and you've got to price. You've got to price it at a level where people are going to be willing to buy it. If it's too high, you're not going to sell anything. And if it's too low, you've left money on the table that's really an important resource for you. So setting that price, and one way is just you go out and test it. You give people a product, or you tell them what you're going to do, and say, and what price would you pay? It's almost better to ask them what price they'd pay, because they'll probably be pretty honest. If you ask them, if you give them a price, then they could maybe go over or under it, depending on something. They probably never tell you that they pay more, but occasionally they might. But, so it is an art, there's no question. And again, as I said before, your cost of goods, as we call it, that variable cost of producing your product or service and supporting it, you might be losing money even in the very early stages with that one. But you've got to show how you're going to get that cost, especially of your product, the basic product, down quickly enough so that then you're making some margin or some profit on each of your sales, and it's just a matter of scaling up the sales to cover your kind of fixed marketing and product development and general and administrative costs. So again, we'll get into that in the third workshop more. So yeah, just start to think about pricing. Don't try yet to set a hard price. Think about it, think about what might work, and then you will at some point want to get out and try to test whether it's reasonable or not. Obviously, if there's a competitor even close to what you're doing, you got to look at their pricing and their ways to do that. So. Okay? Okay. And again, this thing we talked about recurring revenue before, most of your customers, think Netflix, most of the customers would rather pay $10.99 or whatever it is a month now, rather than $120 a year, right, at one time. Just like spreading it out, even though they're probably always going to keep paying it, doesn't make that much big difference, and they've set it up so you don't really need to do anything, no work or no envelopes open. So that works. Now, if you did that to start with, it's probably going to really help you gain those early customers. On the other hand, it'd be nice to have $120 up front to cover your costs, not $10 a month. So those are the trade-offs you get into in some of the pricing and cash flow. Okay, then we want to go up and start talking about the upper left quadrant here, and we're starting with the key partners. And who do you need potentially as a key partner? It obviously depends on your business model, what you're trying to do. Do you need somebody to manufacture for you? Are you going to want to bring in kind of an outside coding house or a Ukrainian coding house to do your coding for you, because you can ramp up the resources a lot better and change if they're not doing a good job, and it's kind of variable pricing and all those that you're not trying to build a 10-person coding team or whatever it is. So all of those things, you just want to look at what kind of partners do I need? Maybe what kind of a partner do I need out there in my channel if I want to go to REI Co-op because I think I've got a great product and I want to keep them, I want to make them my exclusive for the first year. I'm going to offer that if they'll go with me or whatever it is. So what are the partners? And again, what you're trying to do is avoid spending money on resources that you can outsource more easily. And not just save money like that. It actually might cost you a little more early on, but you can ramp up quickly, you can change the level of it quickly, you can get started quickly, and then maybe when you've built up big enough, then you bring some of those services or things inside. So. Okay? Questions there, or? Okay. And again, just spell that out, say, here's the kind of partner. It's not that you've got to pick who the partner is. Let's say I would be better off, laying this sort of activity, this process, this set of things off on this kind of a partner, and I'm going to look for it. Okay. And we talked about all these things, I think. Okay. So key activities. So to do whatever you're going to do, whether it's making stickers or whatever it is, it requires a certain set of activities that you've got to find a way to do and do well. And the more you think through the process and what it's going to take to do it, and therefore how much it's probably going to cost and all those things, helps you really build your kind of projections going forward and stuff. So, and you really these are the things to focus on, right? These kinds of categories of things that you need to do. You don't have to write down accounting or tax reporting or some of those standard things, but unique things that you have to find a way to do. Whether it's if you're going to provide the best quality stickers, you need to figure out how you're going to do that.
Gary, I have a question about this. Do you find that some businesses, especially sort of new entrepreneurs, get this wrong?
Well,
for example, I'll give you an example,
okay.
Right? Like Daniel and Michael Martin, right? Are they actually producing paint? Would we say that a key activity is the actual production of paint? Because they actually they've outsourced that. They have a supplier who sort of is actually producing it. And so I'm curious on, is it that what Michael or the Martin Brothers sort of paint company, what they're really doing is maybe they do some product development and they work with their supplier, or really are they more sort of a marketing company and their job is they actually sell paint?
Right.
Right. Is that sort of?
That's what I'd say, and I think that goes back to the prior one too. You kind of link these two together. The prior one are the partners. So Daniel found a paint sourcing thing that could recycle or combine used paints. So he found that partner. And without that partner, where would you come up with, I don't know, what's it cost, $10 million to have a paint thing? Or I don't know what it is. But.
Well, for us, it was one of those things where we kind of said it from the beginning of we're rebranding a product that was already there.
Yep.
But our partner in it, they didn't understand the full capabilities of the product, and they were focused on production because they employ people with mental and physical disabilities. They don't care about, as long as it's going out the door and being sold, they don't care how it gets there or where it goes, as long as they have room for employment. So we picked up a product that was in good shape, rebranded it, and now we're selling it to a broader market. So technically, in this case, we are rebranding it, and like Dr. Valdez says, we're like a marketing company. That's what it is, but we just selected the product.
Yeah.
So.
Can I ask a question? What do you mean by getting it wrong? You said entrepreneurs tend to get this part wrong.
Well, I can see how it very easily, Daniel and Michael could say, we're paint producers.
Yes, they get embroiled in
so they really start focusing on, exactly, on manufacturing
it. Money and time. And
well, that's not what they're doing.
So is it that their ideas originally did not reflect what they ended up being?
The Martin Brothers had it blocked in. They know who they are, right? But I can see where an individual very much can say is that sort of their perception, their paradigm of sort of what exactly is their value proposition may sort of not be the reality, right? We talk about Red Bull, the beverage, right? Do we argue, is Red Bull, just exclusively sort of just a beverage company? I think if you talk to Daniel, or if you talk to Red Bull, or if you read anything about it, I would say what they're really good is they are exceptional marketers, right? That's the reason why they have, you know, the soccer teams, right, in Austria, in New York, right? Because that's another vehicle, another marketing vehicle for them. Why did they buy Plane Racing League, right? Because they did. Because that was another vehicle for them to market their product. That's what they are very, very good at. There's a reason why that's enabled them to still produce their product in Switzerland and Austria. You talk about labor costs there, you talk about production costs, but that's not their focus. That's really not what they're that's where they're getting their competitive advantage. That's sort of the question.
By the way, the racing league thing, drone racing, last year I tried to convince one group that I had this idea I thought would be really great in the whole drone racing, an online thing that linked all the clubs. There are clubs all over the country, and there are all these things. Could have been the great online news source. Is it somebody doing it now?
Well, actually, I kind of, aside from the drone race, I'm not very well versed with that.
Yeah.
But an easy way to think about it and what your company really is, detach the product from the brand and look at the brand solely. So, for looking at Red Bull as an example, if you remove their energy drinks and whatnot, what is it? I mean, it's really just an engine to market products. So you could really insert, let's say Red Bull's a skateboard company or a brick company or something. They're just be one heck of a marketer. You know, they know how to influence customers and put a product out there. So it doesn't matter what it is, the product's being put out there in their kind of, you know, style.
And so there's some other aspects to it that are more mundane, but trip up entrepreneurs as well. So let me go back to the partners thing, and we had some things about your partners. You want to pick a partner that you think you can work with long term, right? And so one of these companies I'm on a board of here, we're about to buy a company in China and then partner with this big state-owned company to be the kind of marketing arm. We're going to have a joint venture with them. And we think we're in the, you know, we think we've agreed on things. We don't think by owning the manufacturing and design company, you know, they can't go around us and those kinds of things. So you need to think about those in your partnership. Is this, you know, are the attributes of this company that I'm going to work with as a partner, are they going to work for me, or might they want to come in and impede upon or impinge upon my business and what I'm trying to do? So, you know, would this paint company all of a sudden say to Daniel, oh, gee, we think we can do that, and he's set it up so they won't or can't, or pretty sure they won't. So that's one thing on the partners. These are more things, you know, once you've decided that with the partners, then it's picking the right partner, getting the right agreement in place, figuring out what it's going to take to get it going, what they need, and all that. This is very much also, though, your internal activities that you need to do. What do you have to do to really be successful out there? And sometimes we just don't give enough thought to it, about how long it's going to take and how much it's going to cost. So whether it's design of a product, design of a website, design of an app, design of, you know, some coding stuff, just development of a manufacturing process, and then getting the machines in place to do it, whatever it is, we just don't think through enough, and therefore we underestimate the time it's going to take to get us into the market when we're really generating revenues. That means we're burning up any available cash we have for a lot longer because there's no cash coming in, and you just run out of money before you've had the time really to do it. So that's part of it too, is just thinking it through to enough detail where you really understand it, what it's going to take, how long it's going to take, how much it's going to cost, what resources you've got to have internally to achieve that. Those questions? Yeah?
I was just thinking, like, the whole example that you said internally is there any consideration to, like, personally what you desire for business, or is it just like sell as much as you can, infinite growth, or is it like, is there a point where you establish, well, I just want to make a living from this, or I want to expand and grow it, like?
Good question. So that all depends. Everything all depends.
It just seems
so it depends on what you want to do. Okay, if you want to just create what we call lifestyle business and keep running it yourself, not grow it too large where it stresses you too much or takes you away from family or girlfriends or skiing activities or whatever it is, you know, then fine, you can do that, but you still should do it. You should still do this to make sure it's worth the time you're going to spend where you're not going to be making any money, you know, to really build this lifestyle business you're going to do. So that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay? If you go beyond a lifestyle business, now some other things come in. You probably can't self-fund the whole thing unless you have a pretty unique thing. You're probably going to need some outside money, whether it's from a bank, which is tough to do as a startup because you don't have any collateral to offer them other than whatever and stuff. You don't have those. Maybe you've got some relatives that'll loan you some money. But you need to add some things then, and you add stress and you add worry and all those. But you build a bigger entity, and even that, is it build a big entity that you have a clear plan from the beginning that I'm going to run it for 5 years, then find somebody to sell it to, and maybe go on to something else, or I don't have a plan like that. I'm going to keep running it, as long as it keeps growing and is profitable and I'm enjoying what I'm doing. Okay. But the other thing, and I probably should have gone back over this a little bit more in the value proposition, and it's why I asked you, to raise your hands if you were highly confident that you had a great business model. And part of this is the value proposition. Almost the best advice you can get is adopt the idea that your main goal is to solve the problem, not to have them buy your solution. Okay? Because we've seen too many people that just get, they say, this is the best idea ever, this is going to work, I'm going to find a way to make people, they're going to want to buy my product, I'm going to find a way to make that work. And they don't spend enough time, again, back in the customer segments, back in that, really testing out whether that's really what the customer wants, and are they going to buy it, and does your value proposition really solve the problem that they have. Okay, so really say, here's my problem, that somebody isn't getting accurate ultrasound information at home, or whatever it is, and you may really pivot around. Uber pivoted hugely, right? They started with one business model, and now that one's totally gone. They're into what Uber is today, although they're building autonomous cars. That seems pretty stupid to me. But anyway, so as long as you're focused on the problem and say, I'm going to find the best solution to solve that problem, then you're willing to pivot. You're willing to change your solution. You're willing to come up with a better solution if the better solution is something that the customers want. So sometimes that's always not true. Henry Ford's famous for saying, if I asked my customers what they wanted, they'd say a faster horse, not an automobile to drive. So, and Steve Jobs was like that as well. He designed great stuff for his customers, but he was also a little bit almost submissive in saying, they don't really know what they want, I'm going to show them what they really want. And that's okay, but you better test it with them and say, yeah, that is what they really want, before you put a lot of time, resources, money into that. So again, adopt the idea, the mindset that I'm going to solve this problem. I'm going to get the best of all stickers to these brands, or whatever it is, and then be willing to change your whole business model to make that, to solve that problem, and to give your customers the real value properly.
I find it interesting about Tesla, because Tesla, I feel like driving wasn't really a problem. I feel like they were trying to just come up with something new for the heck of it, seeing what people would finish. I think they had so much money, they were like, let's see if this works.
Get away from combustion engines.
Well, but a lot of people are getting away from combustion engines. Look, I have huge respect for that guy. He built SpaceX. And so did. It's funny how these successful guys want to go into space all of a sudden. So whether it's Bezos or him, they're in the space business, right? And he did some really good things there. He really eliminated some levels where in the general government contracting, there are like 5 levels of companies in any kind of big project. We, in the testing of the engines, we're always at the bottom, but they're all those. And it's political. It's so that, that the congressman whose headquarters this one level of companies in are going to be really supportive of it and things like that, and they can show spread out. But it adds on cost because everybody marks up each level of their service and product to the top, and it ends up costing 5x or something. So he came in and said, hell with that, I'm getting rid of all this, I'm going to do everything myself, including testing his own engines, which we haven't talked about. So those kinds of things, and I think Tesla, as much as I admire him, I don't know where he's going. You know, I mean, he's got a nice design, but the Lamborghini guy, I think the Chrysler, anyway, I think the company that owns Lamborghini says, we're going to build an electric Lamborghini. Okay, well then is Tesla going to be, he has to stay ahead at so many levels, and he's not really, he's trying to do so much that I really question it. You know, and in the end, is he going to be best on autonomous cars? Is he going to be best at the battery side? Is he going to be, he's got great design. And he's obviously, you know, hired great designers, but is he always going to be the best? I think he's got a big problem going forward.
There's not a lot of competition so far.
Yeah.
Alta just with their batteries actually. Alta Motorsports, they have the electric dirt bike, and their battery has the longest running, as much power cells.
And I think we also, when you're thinking about Tesla, or you're thinking about what they're doing is, I mean, what I would recommend is you go to their mission, right, and kind of understand sort of, you know, what is sort of, you know, who they are, at least how they envision it, right? And so I did that, just so I can get the quote for you all, is Tesla's mission is to accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy. That's their BHAG. I would even almost call it their vision. That's really where they want to go. If we look at sort of the Tesla sort of motors, right, to accelerate the advent of sustainable transport by bringing compelling mass market electric cars to the market as soon as possible. So that's one of their sort of sort of missions. So really, when you kind of look at it in that perspective, then it kind of makes sense, right? So now obviously, you know, the automotive, that's the one, they want to do that to sustainable. They just purchased that huge sort of battery, the battery farm, right? That once again, that sort of fits into that mission, is that they want to build, what was the biggest impediment, sometimes even about, let's say, solar energy, right? It's the battery technology. That's one of the big inhibitors about that sort of growing. So I think if we look at it where they really want to move this in terms of the entire planet, then we can kind of see how this might sort of align.
Yeah, on the other hand, it's nice to have a mission like that, you know, and it's nice to say, I can do better than anybody else. But if he really sat down, you know, with some devil's advocate or level-headed person, and they said, well, you know, when GM and Ford and Toyota and Volvo said they're going to be all electric in 3 years, or BMW or Mercedes go electric, and they've already been mass producing 80 million cars a year as an industry worldwide. China's now bigger than us at our 17 million. You know, am I going to be able to compete there? What's it going to take? What am I going to be? You know, when he first came out, he was the first and only, and he's not going to be. He's going to be the first forever in a sense, but he's not going to be the only. And so you got to question what he's doing. But I question that about a lot of companies. Uber, why are they spending so much time trying to design an autonomous car? They don't need to do that. A lot of other people will be designing it that they could add in. They need to be working on the apps to connect those cars to passengers and things like that and getting that better. So, you know, I mean, those are beyond it, but they're a little bit, you have to have the same kind of mindset when you're starting something out, what we talked about before. It's a nice idea now, but am I just going to be the first and somebody's going to be able to come in and copy me very easily, and they're going to have more resources to do what they want to do, and they're an established brand, and it's going to be very tough to compete against them. So that's the kind of thinking that I think you need to do.
Tesla, they were talking about building charging stations.
Yes.
And solar highway and
Yep.
and then also the batteries. It's almost like getting the cart before the horse. The cars had limited places they could charge,
Right.
and they're ready, but where can you charge them? And then the battery life, almost like what we were talking about getting wrong
Right.
earlier, that more like revenue stream could be charging stations
Right.
and the battery business.
Right. And if they would focus on that with solar power, I mean, they bought Solar City, which he must have started as well. Right? He bought it, I think, because they were in terrible shape and couldn't make it on their own anymore. But it kind of does fill his quote mission and that he stated for the company. I think he actually changed it a little bit so he could buy Solar City without too much stuff. But so yeah, if he did something like that, you know, and built those as he's going, and then could charge people and charge every kind of an electric vehicle, well, yeah, then I might buy Tesla stock. I sure wouldn't doubt it. So.
Same for
Good point.
hydrogen.
Pardon me?
Same for hydrogen for the vehicle.
Yeah, hydrogen is an old idea that's still old and may come along someday, but
Materials.
liquid hydrogen and liquid oil, that's a little scary. Doable, but how do you store and transport and then fill an auto's hydrogen tank, liquid hydrogen and stuff that they can use. Anyway, we'll see. The world will unfold in front of our eyes. Another question, or?
Well, I was just, you brought up the whole mission statement thing in Tesla, and that, like, put into context what Tesla's actually doing. And it just seems like, where does that fall into all of this model? Is that, like, before you even start this model, you come up with a business statement, or just say?
I don't think so. I think, my personal feeling is that mission statements are pablum. I mean, they're milky, they're a general statement that gives you no real insight into what a company ought to be doing, how it's going to do it, what value prop it's going to be focused on. If he said, we're going to provide our customers with the best something else, but he just has a general mission statement, and I've seen people spend 2 days and they come up with a statement that we probably could have come up with in the first 30 seconds. So I don't think you need it. Your value proposition is much more important. Now, if after that you come up with an overarching tagline for your brand that might, elevate the value proposition to a little bit higher, 3 or 4 word a tagline, then fine. But I wouldn't worry about a mission statement. I don't think you need to say, if you want to build an electric car, I don't think you need to say, our mission is this. I mean, my mission is to build a company that people admire and buy the product from, and it'll turn out to be what I want it to turn out to be. So.
Like, especially around the whole sustainability thing, I feel like that targets your audience, and when your audience kind of reads that, they kind of take into account that you are thinking about that.
But yeah, they are going to take that into account, but it wasn't like he was the only electric car manufacturer. He came up with the first high-end, really cool to drive, with great design features and great other features, electric vehicle, right? So I can't say he was the first. I can't say if he hadn't done it, nobody else would have. Maybe he started it a little bit. Maybe he accelerated the whole process of all the Volvos and the other companies getting back into it. For that, you've got to applaud him. I'm saying I applaud him, but I just think, look at what he's doing in the Model 3. He can't even produce 250 a month or whatever. I mean, he's not a good car manufacturer. He has no idea how to do it, and he's struggling. And that's what he had to be in, and I'd rather have him be in the charging station business with solar panels on the top or something. So,
I think they're thinking of like corporate citizenship and that type of stuff, and like doing good, like for the world, for business and that type of stuff.
Yeah, I feel like some products tie into the ethos
Like
of people, so you tie into like emotional sort of things.
That's a marketing.
So you say that in your branding, right? You say that in your marketing, in your branding, how you talk to people about things. You put it on your website, and about us, and you make those statements in there that allow you to sort of, get that relationship with your potential customers and stuff. And you can become a B Corp if you want, which is allowed in most states. It is allowed in Colorado, and what that does is allow you to take actions, to spend money, to do things that aren't necessarily solely in the shareholders' interest. So if you want to support a sustainability nonprofit, or you want to do some other things that some of your shareholders might say, well, why the hell are you doing that? Well, because it's part of our mission, we want to do it. So at Escape, we've had some B Corps for sure. So it's part of your branding. I don't think it's part of your business model per se. It's part of how you sell.
How would you sort of address that? Let's say last year's Hawk Tank, remember second place, the woman who was the biology student,
Yes.
right? And so her idea, for those that don't remember, is she had done a lot of research on some design work, and she wanted to use solar power to actually make dried food, and then she sort of was going to, her model was exactly how she was going to expand, how it was going to be sort of this large manufacturing, how you have a component making sort of food packages for camping and the outdoors. And I think a big part of her value prop actually was the sustainability aspect.
Yeah, but a lot of people are pushing sustainability. That's one of the most overused, robust, you can name 5 or 6 words. And I don't know how much that separates you. Clearly with her, it was important.
Sure.
But I don't know if you've seen it, the ad that one of the credit cards puts on, I think it's American Express, where this group goes out in their Volkswagen van to the Mojave Desert, pulls out this little refracting kind of pan, puts kernels of corn in it, and the sun pops them. And so now they're sustainable because they're using the sun to pop their corn, and they have to immediately have 3 or 4 more of these things, and they get the, it's almost overdone in some ways, I think. See, I think you have to be careful. I think in some cases, it's what you're all about, and you should be with her. It was, and if you're going to be different, if you're going to have something. But she had a product too. I mean, it was sustainable.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
So it wasn't just, I want to do. It fit in with a lot of people that care about it.
Sure.
It's a clear movement, right?
And we use that Volkswagen example. Let's say instead of, for them, sustainability is they make popcorn with this solar refractor. But let's say Volkswagen pulls in the commercial and they announce that they're 100% recycled parts. Right? Now they've made a strategic pivot because number one is theoretically it's going to actually add costs to their production. And so now they're hoping that the market will be receptive to that and pay a premium price. I'm not saying that's a
really good
bad,
idea.
but I think, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that to me would be a real shift to sustainability.
Yeah.
That would be a core factor in terms of what their business model would be.
Yeah.
Or at least their marketing.
Sure.
At least their marketing, exactly. And at least a certain product segment that puts them out there, and they need something positive right
I know, seriously.
after what they went through when I used to own their stock.
Did
before.
you?
Yeah, and it was doing great. And then I saw what they did, and I said, oh damn, I don't want to be associated with that group anymore. So.
I think instead of trying to say sustainability is something you can be part of, it's part of the new paradigm. That yes, I'm on the right side of
Yeah.
the future, like
Yeah.
organic foods.
Right.
Because I'm not using pesticides. I'm sustainable. That's the way everything needs to be.
Exactly. So one of the companies that went through Scape, 2 women, and they wanted to do essentially sustainable clothing. All the way from the raw materials to get them from organic cotton farms and this and that. And they were working with brands. And then when the brands created stuff, they were putting it on a website to sell it to people that cared about that. All the way through how do you recycle clothes, besides wear them until they totally disintegrate, but how do you recycle clothes and do things like that. So they're clearly, sustainability was their mantra. That's what they were in it for. That's what they were selling. An awful lot of the brands are really catching on to that, and they want to be able to show that. So for them, it was absolutely, crucial to their business model, crucial to what they were doing. I'm not saying any of these things are not, that you need that. I mean, I was sort of getting to the mission statement. If sustainability is part of your value prop, then clearly you're going to build that into everything and find a way to say it.
It's value. It's like, I'm an organic farmer. I produce this and time into that.
Right.
Because that's your market.
Yeah. And Chip Peddler, he does that. He's got corn that comes from the reservations and all this other stuff. That's a key part of his stuff. So
I think something to keep in mind, because first off, sustainability is great and wonderful, and everybody wants it, but it's expensive as hell.
yes.
It's very expensive. And as a startup, you want to be as efficient as possible. And once you start to stretch yourself across this, we're going to use solar and wind and whatever it is to build your product, that is so expensive. So think efficient. And you can have those ideas and implement them as your company grows. But if you have an expectation that you're going to start as this Tesla style, rocket ships and electric cars, you need to scale it down to where you are realistically and build upon that. So
So again, unless it's a fundamental part of your value prop, you can want to do it. And it's great that you want to. It's great that you move in those directions. Great that you move by getting more employees to be owners of your company. All of those things are good, and you ought to be trying to do those. But unless it's part of actually your value proposition and what you're offering to your customers and why they're going to buy, then don't emphasize it at first. Emphasize the things that are important to your customers. And if that's it, fine, do it. But if not, it's nice, but not required and very expensive. And, I was just thinking through what Professor Valdez said, a totally recycled parts car was built. I mean, it's a great idea, but can you imagine how expensive that would be to put those parts together and stuff? So anyway, okay. So I think the last one here, oops. Yeah, okay, so key resources, again, this all fits together, right? It's partners, it's the activities we're going to do, it's what resources do we need. And again, if you can do something that's going to protect this competitive advantage you have and make it sustainable competitive advantage, that is, it goes for a long time. You know, what do you have to do that? You know, a lot of people, and some people spend money on patents when they're not going to get it. Other people didn't do a patent when they should have. It would have protected them. So things like that, how you're going to build, you know, copyrights and trademarks and ways you're going to protect your brand, and then what other kinds of resources you need to accomplish all those things that we're talking about. You need a sales force. You know, we'll talk about that for a second. That in our, we'll get to it in financial projections, but every company I think I ever invested in the venture capital world, and almost all of them stayed, maybe with the exception of one or two, totally missed their revenue projections. You know, you come pretty good with costs, but you're always, your optimism shows through in the revenue projections, both how quickly you're going to start it, how fast it's going to ramp up, and those things. So you really need to be conservative there, but you know, important to think through. You're going to have a sales force. It's going to take you longer, if that's how you're going to market. It's going to take you longer to get that set up. It's going to take you longer to do anything than you really think it's going to. So it gets back to the activities thing, about thinking through that, about, you know, writing them down, how much is it going to cost, how long is it going to take, and then coming to some of this too.
Are you going to come back for any other workshops?
Two.
Are you going to be talking about your venture capital experience and how that relates to us, how we can approach that situation?
Well, I'm trying to sort of, you know, feed those threads into everything I talked about. So, you know, the thing I just said about revenue, that came from the venture capital world and stuff. So.
Can I ask a quick question here?
Yep.
So we're talking about the key activities. Now, is that typically we're focusing on sort of the organizational capabilities?
Well, it's whatever the organization has to do that your partners are not going to do,
Okay.
to really be able to develop and deliver and support the product to your customers.
Okay. And then obviously the key resources. Where does it fit into here? Sort of, let's say, you know, you do something better than everyone else, right? Is that sort of more in the value prop aspect of it, or is that more of in, you know, the key activities part, or is it both?
It's both.
Okay.
Okay, if you do something better than anybody else and you have a unique capability of doing that,
Sure.
then it's part of your value prop.
Okay.
And therefore, whatever those things are that you do better than anybody else has to be a key resource that you really hone in on and can deliver it at scale, right? As you get more customers. It's one thing to say, oh, I can do one-offs of these. Can I really do it as I'm building my business and be better than anybody else at that activity? So, but again, it's just thinking through all of the things. I mean, we think about products a little, we think about product development a little more, we think about customers, some of this other stuff that we've got to do, we just don't think about that much. So that's what this is. Okay, any more questions? No? Okay. So then you get into cost structure, and again, I think you can appreciate that until you've defined your customer relationships and the channel you're going to use and the partners you're going to lay things off to, then you can't even begin to do your cost stuff. I mean, it'd be nice to do a rough thing to say, boy, I may be off by a factor of X, but at least am I in the ballpark, or is this thing just going to cost me so much that I'd have to raise $10 million out of the gate to get it to a cash flow positive position and stuff. So do a little bit of that, but don't really try to hone in. This is the last of the 3 workshops I do, focuses on financial projections, where you'll get into details on revenue and cost and balance sheet, things you need, asset purchases you need, and stuff like that. And really focuses on cash flow. Free cash flow is the crucial number that all of you have to worry about. So again, we'll get more of this later. I do want to make one point that, sometimes, again, you're optimistic. If you weren't, you wouldn't be sitting here, right? You believe you can do something. You believe you've got a great idea. You believe you can push it ahead, and I think you probably can. But part of that is I can do everything better than anybody else can, right? And sometimes, even though you can potentially do that, the cost of doing it is going to be so much greater than letting somebody else that's a percentage or two behind you in whatever do it for you, because you've got to concentrate on the key things. Okay, you can't do everything. You've got to concentrate on what's really crucial. So if what you're doing, if this thing that I'm doing better than anybody else is integral to my value proposition, to my customer relationships, to my ability to price at the right level, to make this an attractive business, fine. If it's not, you should be willing to outsource almost every business activity at first if you can. Because it'll just help you. They've built the resource base, they've built the platforms, they can do things. It's amazing how long it takes to onboard, to find an employee, to get them on board, to get them trained, to make them productive, and so on. So tough to do. At early stages, you can always bring something back in-house, always, right? But early stages, if somebody else can do it and you don't have to, unless it's something that's so crucial to you that you're worried that they will torpedo your whole business, then you really want to lay it off if you can.
So I want to take into example some things that are free, like posting your business onto Yelp. The aspect of it still being free is that you can put an amount of freemium content onto that page with no costs. As soon as a Yelp sales associate contacts you and says, "Hey, we can boost this for you," where is the point on a graph where it becomes more productive? Is that in the early part of a business starting up, or is that more of a mid-range, late game kind of okay, I've established myself, now I'm going to put the cherry on top? Is
it a cherry or is it scoop two of the ice cream? That's what you got to decide, right? Is it something I absolutely have to do? I started it out this way on the free stuff so that I could test it out, I could see the reaction, I could see who's doing it, I could go this far, but really to build this, I need to pay for each response or click or whatever it is, right? So, and you just got to decide that. There's not one answer to any, they're all different, right? It all depends. So you've just got to decide that, and you've got to try to have reasonable set of projections from the Yelp salesperson about what it's really going to result in with you, and make sure you don't end up signing up for a 3-year contract you can't get out of if it doesn't work.
Vocabulary clarification, add capital requirements as well, tied to specifics.
Yeah.
Come out money, capital.
Right. So again, when the guy wrote this book, he was writing it for established companies. Most of them didn't worry about having access to capital. They already had it. They were established. They were doing a good job. Clearly, government agencies don't worry about access to capital. They have as much as they need usually. But you guys as startups, capital is the money that you spend one way or the other. So if you have an operating loss, that is all your operating expenses, your revenue less all your operating expenses, you're probably going to lose money for the first day, week, month, quarter, year, 2 years, whatever it is. Uber's still losing today, right? So, and Tesla as well. So that's the operating loss. You've got to cover that somehow. Where's that money come from to pay your expenses? And then you're going to have to buy some things, right? Typically, you're going to have to buy some computers or some furniture or some production equipment, or it depends again on your business, right? And that's a capital expenditure. It's called. You're buying an asset. That doesn't get expensed right away. That gets put on your balance sheet and depreciated over a number of years, although for taxes that change. And then if you're giving your customers 30 days to pay, let's say, which businesses typically want at least 30 days to pay. Well, okay, then in effect you're loaning the money for 30 days to your customer. Where is that money coming from? You've got to be able to fund that, because that money isn't coming in day one. cover expenses. So we'll go through this. That's a cash flow issue. And that's, so the capital required is your total. So you're going through the death valley, right? You're going through this thing where you know for the first whatever period of your existence as a business, you are losing money. You're burning cash in the venture capital of vernacular. And whether that cash is being used for operating expenses or CapEx or working capital, building inventory, whatever, you still need cash. So that's capital. You're using it up. At some point, you bottom out. You better bottom out, otherwise you go out of business at some point. So you bottom out in terms of, because you turn cash flow positive on new stuff, and you can, begin paying back and things like that. So that biggest negative number is the total amount of capital that you need. If everything goes like you hoped it will and projected it will, then you need to add 20 or 25% onto that, because nothing will go like you, not everything will go like you thought it would. So that's kind of the capital this thing ends up with when we add the financial projections modeling to it, ends up. You tell yourself, because you have put in all the assumptions, but you'll tell yourself how much capital you need to make it go over the piece. So, does that answer it, you think, or?
Yeah, it was more than I needed.
Okay.
That's
I always get more than's needed, right? That's my value prop. Whether you like it or not, I give you more than you need. So.
The question when to spend money to take to the next level sounds to me like an MBA type question, which to me sounds like something you would need a team of business partners, an accountant and an MBA, and people to help you make that business decision beyond your initial idea of starting it. Now I'm going into another level of the business. Like I've read about people who might be good at starting a business, but that doesn't mean you have the skill set to take it to the next level, or even to the IPO, or even beyond that, a whole new set of skills and teams.
Right. So I mean, in the venture business, that's what we were always dealing with, right? It wasn't just how much money do you need, what you're doing, but are you building the staff, are you building the capabilities? When do we think we've built enough of a base so we're ready to make this next big expenditure, which always meant going out for now round A or round B or round, another E and F. But because it typically requires more capital, right? You haven't generated so much cash that's sitting in the bank that you can use that. You're hopefully break even or better, and now you believe that continuing to scale up is going to be a positive cash flow experience for you, but you need to raise some capital. So yes, you need a team. One of the things I find, but all of you, it's your business, it's your ideas, and you should be able to explain to your accountant or your business advisor or your investment partners what it's going to take to get to the next level. What do I have to spend? Where do I have to go? What additional things do I need to do? How much does it cost me? How much time is it going to take? What additional incremental revenue and incremental costs, therefore incremental profit, am I going to get out of this? Like today, we went over what's buying this thing in China mean incrementally to us, right? Is it, we got to spend $3.5 to $5 million year one. Are we going to make that back with an adequate return? So those are things. But what I find is that the business owners don't work enough with their financial statements. Okay, they leave it to an accountant, and believe me, the accountant is not going to give you the right answer. You need to understand them well enough. You don't need to produce them necessarily, but you need to say, this is what I want them to tell me, how things are going, with a focus on cash burn, how it's doing, and you need to understand them well enough so you can have an intelligent conversation with those people, not just relying on what they tell you to really understand what it's doing. But do you need a 5-person team? No, I don't think so. Do you need full-time people? No. But you do need advice at every level of this where you're going to the next level. You ought to review, almost redo your business model, and certainly update your financial projections for the next 3 to 5 years. Certainly any investor is going to want those for sure. Okay? So again, this, so right here, and again, and Steve Blank and Eric Rees are the best at pointing these out, that any business model is just a set of assumptions that you totally believe in 100%, or you wouldn't be wasting your time going after it. but you've got to understand that they really are assumptions. And really be able to pinpoint, indicate, what am I assuming has to happen to make this work? You know, whether it's what the customers want in a product, how much they're willing to pay, how much it's going to cost me to get it to them, whether I can effectively get it to them channel-wise, and get them, how I bring them, how I tell them about the product, go with each step as they go through the sales funnel, as it's called, which we'll get to in the next session. All of those things you have to understand, because if I go out and advertise and do this and get, 1,000 people to click, and only 2 of them end up in, where they're willing to buy a product, unless it's a very expensive product, you probably don't have a business, right? You just got to think through all of those things, every part of what I've got to do, who my partner's going to be, who my channel's going to be, what my customers want, can I deliver it to them, all of those things. So really approach this. You're not trying to chisel. This isn't a stone thing where you're chiseling the final, the final model in day one. You're trying to really understand it and really have a picture of it and really be able to test your own assumptions. And it's always good. I mean, have a friend that shares a house or is on your floor or whatever it is. Just corral them someday and say, hey, I want to go over my business model canvas with you and see what you think of this. You'll be surprised. Look at some of the good feedback you got today from somebody interested in this. So, not that you guys aren't the most gifted people already doing it, but you'd be surprised at what good input or people just ask questions. They say, well, do you really think you can do that? And they'll give you some indications of what you got to focus on. So do that, right? And so it's all this stuff. You set a hypothesis. This is my guess, is what it's going to take. You go out and test it and confirm it. You do the analysis about it, what I learned from it, and then you adjust if you need to. And the adjustments are typically called pivots. You change your business model in some way to have a higher probability of success. And that happens. I mean, one of our good escape companies that's in the magazine licensing business just kind of totally pivoted in the last 2 weeks to what I kind of always thought was a better model, but they finally, they're agreeing they're going to do it, and I think it's going to work great. So.
Where's the magazine?
Epic?
Okay, good.
Lisa Moore. Okay, and then again, we've already talked about this, but why is that? Why isn't that? So,
Yeah, you can read it out.
So what that says is added layer of disruptive models to articulate. I'll be your reader.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. So again, if you're really disruptive, if you're doing something nobody else has ever done, now you've really got a set of assumptions, right, that you've got to work harder at testing out. If you're doing something that other people have done and you've just got a better way of doing it that you think is worthwhile, a little bit easier to test. So, and it's a little bit harder if it's totally disruptive. Again, it's kind of harder to line up yourself exactly like against the competitors, but you can also do it. And you're disrupting because you're changing how they can, you're changing you're focusing on ways that they compete, but they just don't focus on as much. Don't worry about, don't do as good a job, you're going to do it better. Okay. So this is about iterating. That's why I said you don't write on this with something that you can't erase. Okay, this thing, you put sticky notes up. Okay, and the one thing, if you've got a couple of different business ideas, like a different channel approach, then do a different color that highlights those channels and the cost of those channels and things like that. So maybe it's yellow is the standard color, but blue for this alternative kind of model approach. And then when you really focused on and you've asked a lot of questions, you've thought about it enough that you can say, this is the most critical assumption I'm making. This is the one I've got to test out and analyze and get some evidence on. Do that in red, so you're always looking at that one, and that's really your focus.
And if you're looking for sticky notes, come to my office at EBH 150, and I'll provide you with multicolor sticky notes. Okay, we're full service here.
Yes, I'll say.
Okay.
You got a good value prop.
So just so y'all know, I'm all joking aside. Okay, we'll give you the business model canvas tonight, and then as you guys sort of look at it, if you have your own stickies, great. If not, come by my office and I'll look at it. Okay.
Okay, and again, even I've got it here, even on the first pass, you know, if there are any alternatives, even ones that maybe you've considered a little bit but tossed aside, put them up. Let other people look at it too. And just the first session, when you're putting stuff up, when you're putting the sticky notes up for all this, it's a brainstorming session. Okay, it's not trying to prove that this is the optimal one. You're trying to put up alternatives and different ideas and things like that. Okay. Okay. Oh,
Would
sorry.
it be an affinity diagram? Would that be a good?
Sorry, say again?
An affinity diagram? Would that be a good way to start that? Having a sticky note and having like 2 or 3 people or person or persona, and then thinking about what those people would want and putting sticky notes up.
That could be good. Yep. A lot of people do. If you go online or you look at the book, they spend a lot of time, you know, put diagrams on these things and stuff. And, you know, it's good, but it takes a lot of time, and you got to be really good at doing it, or it gets to be a mess. So, but yeah, no, if you've got something key like that, I think it's great, especially if it's, you know, the key assumption you're making. Do a little thing around it and stuff, whatever it is. Yeah.
I use bullet lists in Microsoft Word.
Yeah.
You can get different levels and
Yeah.
brainstorm, and then not using stickies or paper, but then be able to transfer it.
I think it's just harder to look at, harder to have somebody stand up and see all the pieces and move quickly through it, but, oh, for yourself. Well, it's a way to start, but when you start showing it to people, when you start asking for input and feedback from others, which you absolutely should, then I think it's better to have them up on sticky notes on this thing. So. And it's easy, I mean, it's the same thing as doing a bullet, right, on Microsoft. You bullet, you put something on one sticky note, and if later you think, oh, I don't like that, you know, you don't delete it, just rip it off and throw it in the recycling bin. Right? Okay. Anything else on that one? Okay. So we're going to talk about some other things again, because this wasn't meant for startups. There's got to be more emphasis on customer development. I mean, he assumed that these big companies already had customers. And sure, they're trying to get new ones, but they've already got them. So we've just got to spend a lot of time. We talked about, well, I've done this thing, this affinity diagram with my hands or whatever, but this funnel, the sales funnel, where, you know, you bring in original contacts and then you've got to move them down through to the final point where they're buying from you. So we'll go through some of that stuff, how you do it, and things like that. And, you know, that helps you. I mean, you do those kinds of things and you test them out. It helps you test the pricing, helps you test the channel that you're using, is that effective or not, and those things. And again, it's a little premature, but a lot of us, what we do is we'll do the test, and then afterwards we'll say, oh, of course, that was a good number, I'm happy with that. Well, you don't want to do that. You set a pass-fail first, especially something tied into what the financial results would mean. And if you don't get there, then you got to change, right? And lots of times we just don't do that. We say, oh, yeah, well, I was hoping for 40, but actually 6% is good enough. So. Okay? And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. So I talked a little bit about the blue ocean strategy thing. And they've got a great one. I think one of the best ones is Southwest Airlines, which they come out in the end and say they weren't really trying to compete against airlines. They were trying to compete against family, especially family point-to-point auto trips, the way they were doing things. And, you know, I think originally that's what they were doing, right? They never went to a hub, and they just went point-to-point through these less served markets and tried to make it cheaper than driving and stuff. So, and there's a bunch of others that they do. It's really cool. I think that book, pretty sure it's in the library.
Yeah, we have definitely a blue ocean strategy here. But I think what's really cool is and sort of the idea behind it is when you're looking to sort of get the blue ocean, right? You want to have nobody around you, no competitors, and sort of they kind of break it up into, well, there's 2 ways to do it, right? You can do it where you sort of reinvent the industry, right? So you're disruptive, right? Cirque du Soleil and circuses, right? Guess what? Pretty much circuses with animals are now out of business, right? Literally out of business, and that's what Cirque du Soleil did. Is they went and redefined what it means to be a circus. You look at Southwest. What did they do? Is they went after customers nobody else wanted, right? That's what they did. When Honda first came into the U.S. market, what did they do? They went after the customers that they knew General Motors and Ford didn't want. That's who they went for. They wanted the blue ocean. They didn't want competitors. And so that is a really good, and there's some really good sort of summaries of blue ocean. If anyone sort of wants to be pointed in the right direction, once again, come see me, and I'll be able to sort of give you some thought.
And I think what it gets you to really do, we all think, we tend to say, oh, this company is just a high quality, a Mercedes high quality thing, or this is it. But any company is really competing along much more than just one. It's 5 or 6 different areas of products or features or price or whatever it is that they're offering that they choose to compete against. And what we see is, in most industries, they line up against each other because they just copy each other in a way. And so what you want to do is find a way not to copy, but to come in with something totally different. Okay, sorry. And then we've got, so the marketing model, we'll talk more about that next time. It kind of fits into the customer development, but it's really a way to, figure out who your customers are, how you're going to reach them, what it's going to take, what it's going to cost, and then, what could I put in as a reasonably realistic or not insane revenue projection that I am willing to bet my future on and stuff. So we'll talk about that. And then operations model, that's kind of the activities in a way. You did have that, but it's the processes. Every activity is a process, and you ought to think through the process and what it's going to take and what you're going to do and all those things. So that one is in there a bit. And then the financial model is simply your projections, and he's got revenue and costs, so you could go into that, but he doesn't have capital requirements for CapEx, investments, equipment, things like that, and he doesn't, sort of put all those together and say, okay, to make this business have a chance of succeeding, I need this amount of outside capital, investment capital, whatever. Could come out of your pocket. You could sell a car or mortgage, or a second mortgage on whatever you're living in, if it's yours, or borrow it from friends or whatever. But you've got to come up with capital typically to start a business, unless it's just something you can do yourself and just build it slowly and do that. Then at least you're going to minimize the capital you need. And occasionally I've seen 1 or 2 businesses that could grow without any. And if you look at the Inc. surveys, when they ask how many companies started with no capital, it's a relatively small percentage.
Gary, where's the management team fit into this?
Well, so the management team kind of gets back to what are my key activities, what are my resources, and resources that includes all the key people you need.
Okay.
So yeah, exactly. That's where the whole management team that you've got to build is in resources. And it's based on what activities you're going to do, and especially when. So none of you need a CFO day one. You ought to be hiring an outside. Right, we don't need you. Well, you ought to be hiring
I'm my own CFO.
Okay, good. So, and all of you ought to be kind of at first, but all of you are going to bring in an hourly bookkeeper to run your books. You're going to tell them how you want them set up. We're going to talk about that a little more. Most of them don't know how to set it up to give you ongoing information that's worth anything, but you're going to tell them that, then they're going to do it for you. They're going to do all the grunt work of loading all the individual transactions, whether it's a bill or hopefully revenue coming in or whatever it is. So,
what is the reason for not doing it yourself?
well, if you've got the skill to do it yourself, fine. But you've probably got more important things to do with your time than what it would cost you, say, $20 an hour, $25 an hour to hire a bookkeeper.
Okay.
So that's the trick. Yeah, it's like that thing we said before. Yeah, you could be the best at doing it, maybe better than any other bookkeeper or tax accountant in town.
Is that right?
But is that where you ought to spend your time? Your time is, worth its weight in 10x gold, right? I mean, that's what's going to be. Money and time are your limiting factors in trying to be successful. And you've got to focus your time on the key activities that are fundamental to making the business successful and are fundamental and that only you can do in a sense, or that you're the best one to do. And bookkeeping doesn't fall in that category. Okay, so you'll end up with having at least gone through some of this. It's worth it. I mean, if you want the judges to rank you highly, you've got to have some financial projections that are reasonably believable, and that we've set the model up so that it tells you the maximum the amount of capital or investment you've got to raise, because it focuses on cash flow, and that's what all you got to focus on. I mean, profitability, the way things are in there to get it, doesn't help you with much. It doesn't tell you the other assets you might have to buy or things like that. The bottom line is cash flow. That's a name, all of you ought to name your first child cash flow, because you're going to be mumbling it forever. So
And remember,
it's good to have a double use.
Is that we have resources for you to help you. I see a couple eyes sort of rolling. No stress, right? We are going to have workshops. Mr. Masner has developed something for you all that is, I mean, talking about worth its weight in gold. It's amazing. His spreadsheet that he sort of is going to share with you, as well as Dr. Hilliard, is phenomenal. It's one of the best ones I've ever seen. We also have Beta Alpha Psi, who have volunteered that you'll have one of their sort of team members or club members, it's the Finance Accounting Honor Club, that they'll actually be sort of your consultant for your team. So if this is an area where you feel that this is a growth area for you, or this is an area you don't know at all, via the workshops as well as the support from Beta Alpha Psi and Dr. Hilliard, you will be covered. Okay, I'm really excited. That's one thing that we really worked on the last 2 years, is to make sure those resources were available to all participants, either students or recent alumni. So, but we'll go over this. So don't stress. Right now we're just sort of giving you that sort of high level, and then we'll start drilling down as we progress this semester.
Good. Okay. That wraps up this one. So I hope none of you are discouraged too much by the amount of effort it's going to take to do this. It's worthwhile, because the time you spend on this, every hour you spend on this will save you a minimum of 25 hours of wasted time, or working on the wrong thing, or going in the wrong direction. So it's really, just spend as much time as you possibly can working on this and getting it right and getting feedback. Okay? And again, not being wedded to your assumed solution, but wedded to what's the product I'm solving, how I'm going to do it.
Wonderful, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, you all, thank you again. If I've emailed you before, I have your email still, so I'll keep you in the loop. I'll make sure you know what resources are coming available.